They took my child without asking. I stood in the doorway, hospital scrubs still damp at the cuffs, and nodded like I'd heard something ordinary. If you've ever trusted family, only to be quietly betrayed, don't blink. This story unfolds in ways you won't expect, and every moment matters. Inside, my chest was already tightening the way it does right before bad news settles in. I didn't ask where she was. Not yet. I set my bag down carefully, slower than usual, as if speed might expose what I was already thinking. There was a plan forming, quiet and unfinished, and I needed it intact. It was 6:42 p.m. The microwave clock glowed blue, 3 minutes fast like always. The house smelled wrong. Not burned, not rotten, just cleared out. Empty in a way that felt intentional. My daughter's laughter usually leaked into the hallway the moment I stepped inside. Tonight there was only the low hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my mother folding something in the living room. "Where's Anna?" I asked, keeping my voice even. My mother didn't look up. "We handled it," she said. "You've been working too much." I slipped off my shoes and noticed the rug by the door had been straightened. My sister always did that when she was nervous. She was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling her phone, not touching the tea I'd made earlier that morning. That was my first real clue. She never let tea go cold. I followed the quiet down the hall. Anna's bedroom door was open. Too open. The nightlight was off. Her bookshelf was missing its top row of favorites. The stuffed rabbit she slept with was gone. The night air from the open window smelled like rain, and it shouldn't have. I pressed my thumb into the doorframe, feeling the old splinter there, grounding myself. "She's with us for a while," my mother said behind me. "We voted." The word hit harder than shouting. Voted. As if my life were a committee meeting. I turned around slowly. My sister's jaw tightened. She wouldn't meet my eyes. That told me more than either of them realized. I asked one question. "Who picked her up from school?" There was a pause. Too long. My sister cleared her throat. "I did. He was fine. Happy, actually." I smiled. Just a little. Anna's school didn't release her without written permission. I hadn't signed anything. I kept that thought to myself. Some advantages are better left unspoken, especially when the other side assumes you're cornered. "You should have called me," I said. "You were on shift," my mother replied. Again. I felt the familiar sting of that word. Again, but I swallowed it. At my age, you learn when anger is useful and when it's just loud. I walked back into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, careful to keep my posture relaxed. My legs were aching. My feet still smelled faintly of antiseptic and rubber gloves. I noticed my keys were no longer on the hook. Another small absence. My sister finally spoke. "This isn't permanent. Just until you rest." Another small word carrying a lot of weight. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Someone had circled Friday in red ink. Not my handwriting. That too went into the quiet list forming in my head, alongside times, faces, and decisions that hadn't included me. "I need to see her," I said. My mother folded her hands. "Not tonight." The refrigerator hummed louder, or maybe I was listening harder. I thought about the security camera we'd installed last winter after a break-in down the street. I thought about the binder in my bedroom drawer, the one I kept for insurance and school forms. I thought about how often people confuse calm for consent, especially with women my age. I also thought about how easily routines reveal patterns if you know where to look. That knowledge steadied me. It always had. "I'm going to my room," I said. No one stopped me. That was another mistake. As I closed the door behind me, I heard my sister whisper, "She's taking this better than I thought." I sat on the edge of the bed, scrubs wrinkling under my palms, and let the silence stretch. Somewhere across town, my daughter was sleeping in a place she hadn't chosen. Down the hall, my family was convincing themselves they were right. I pictured Anna's face and memorized the calm, knowing memory can be armor when truth matters later. Especially now, in moments like this, for me, alone tonight again, quietly, always, forever, silently, now always still. I took a slow breath and felt something settle that had nothing to do with fear. Something firm and patient, waiting to be used. I stood up, smoothed my uniform, and opened the door again. "We're not done," I said, meeting their eyes for the first time. "Not even close." No one answered me. My mother's mouth tightened, the way it always did when she decided silence was a form of authority. My sister looked down at her phone again, pretending interest, but her foot kept tapping against the chair leg. I stood there another moment, long enough for the quiet to make them uncomfortable, then I turned and went back to my room. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently. That, more than anything, seemed to confuse them. I sat on the bed and let my shoulders drop. My heart was still racing, but my face felt calm, almost detached. I'd learned long ago that panic wastes energy. I needed mine intact. From the hallway I could hear their voices lower, the murmured confidence of people who think the hardest part is over. They thought my lack of protest meant agreement, or at least resignation. That assumption was the first crack. I changed out of my scrubs slowly, folding them the way I always did, muscle memory keeping my hands steady. As I moved I listened. My sister laughed once, too loudly. My mother said my name, followed by "she'll understand." That was new. She hadn't said that word earlier. Understand meant they were already explaining my silence to themselves. I sat on the edge of the bed and took a breath through my nose, cataloging what I knew and what I didn't. A few minutes later my sister knocked. She didn't wait for an answer. "We ordered dinner," she said, standing in the doorway. "You should eat." I looked up at her. Her eyes flicked to my nightstand where my notebook lay half hidden under a book. I watched her notice it. Watched her decide it was nothing. "I'm not hungry," I said. He shrugged. "Suit yourself." Then casually, "Anna was tired. She fell asleep right away." I nodded. "That's good." She smiled, relieved by my tone, and walked away. I waited until her footsteps faded before I reached for the notebook. It wasn't special. Just lined paper, a pen that wrote smoothly. I wrote the date at the top. Then the time. Then who said what, in plain language, no opinions. I didn't know yet who would read it, but I knew how much weight facts could carry when emotions stopped being useful. Later I went to the bathroom to wash my face. The mirror showed me someone older than I felt, lines etched deeper by years of compromise. As I dried my hands I noticed my purse wasn't where I'd left it. It was on the hook behind the door instead of the counter. I checked inside. Everything was there, but things had been shifted. My wallet turned the wrong way. Receipts straightened. Someone had been looking. That told me they were already worried, even if they didn't know why. At dinner I sat quietly, answering when spoken to, offering nothing extra. My mother talked about schedules and rest, about how children need stability. She used the word "we" often, as if it were a shield. I nodded at the right moments. My sister mentioned school forms, slipped in a detail she hadn't shared before. I asked one gentle question just for clarification. She answered too quickly, then corrected herself. I watched the color rise in her cheeks. Afterward I cleared my plate and washed it by hand, even though the dishwasher was empty. The warm water helped. My mother stood nearby, supervising without saying so. "You look exhausted," she said. "This is for the best." "For now," I replied. She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I hear you." That satisfied her. It shouldn't have. That night I lay in bed, eyes open, listening to the house settle. I replayed the evening, matching words to expressions, pauses to truth. I thought about routines and rules, about how systems depend on people assuming no one is paying attention. Somewhere between midnight and morning, certainty replaced fear. Not about the outcome, but about myself. I was still here. Still thinking. Still capable. Just before sleep took me, I heard my sister whisper in the hall, "She's taking this really well." I smiled in the dark because that was exactly what I needed them to believe. I smiled in the dark because that was exactly what I needed them to believe, and I stayed very still until the house began to wake around me. Morning came with the smell of coffee I hadn't made. I lay there listening to cabinets open and close, voices low, confident. They were already moving forward without me. That settled something in my chest. I got dressed carefully, choosing soft clothes that didn't rustle, and stepped outside with my phone under the excuse of fresh air. The sky was pale, undecided. My hands were steady when I dialed the school. The receptionist recognized my name. That helped. I asked simple questions, the kind that sound harmless. "Who signed her out yesterday? At what time? With what authorization?" There was a pause, then the careful clicking of keys. "That's odd," she said. Odd is a useful word. It opens doors. She promised to check and call back. I thanked her and wrote the time down on the back of an envelope. I walked slowly down the driveway, pretending to stretch. My mother waved from the kitchen window, smiling. I waved back. Then I called the pediatrician's office. I didn't accuse. I asked about records about recent visits. The nurse hesitated, then told me a note had been added late yesterday afternoon. I asked who requested it. She said she'd need to confirm permissions. Another pause. Another promise. My breath fogged the cool air. Inside, breakfast was waiting. Toast already buttered. My sister talked about errands, about traffic. I listened, nodding, asking nothing. When my phone buzzed, I excused myself to the bathroom. The school had called back. No written permission. No emergency contact listed for my sister. We followed instructions, the woman said carefully. We thought it was temporary. Temporary seems to make people brave. I sat on the edge of the tub, heart pounding now but not wildly. Controlled. I thanked her again and ended the call. In the mirror, my face looked pale but focused. I thought about how often women my age are expected to raise alarms to be believed. I wasn't going to do that. I was going to be precise. Next, I called the district office. That number had taken me years to learn mattered. The man who answered sounded tired. I told him I had a question about procedures. I could almost hear him straighten. Procedures make people feel safe. I asked where to send a statement. He gave me an email address. I wrote it down. By mid-morning, my sister was pacing. She kept checking her phone, frowning. My mother asked if I felt better. I said yes. That seemed to reassure her. I stepped into the laundry room and called a number from memory, one I hoped I wouldn't need again. The woman who answered listened without interrupting. She asked me to slow down, then asked for dates. I gave them. She told me what could wait and what couldn't. I felt my knees weaken and sat on the dryer. When I hung up, the house felt smaller. Not trapped. Measured. I noticed details I'd missed before. The calendar with unfamiliar notes. The extra car seat by the door. All signs of confidence. All signs of people who thought this was settled. My phone rang again. The pediatrician's office this time. They were apologetic. They couldn't release information without my consent. They asked if I wanted to update records. I said yes. Fully. Curry. Each word felt like a brick laid exactly where it belonged. At lunch, my sister snapped at me for using the wrong mug. I apologized. My mother corrected her gently. Power shifts show up in small ways. I excused myself again and sent the email. No emotion. Just facts. By early afternoon, the house was too quiet. They were waiting. I sat at the table, hands folded, phone beside me. I didn't feel angry. I felt ready. Somewhere across town, decisions were being reconsidered. I could feel it, the way you feel weather change before the clouds move. When my mother finally asked what I'd been doing all day, I looked up at her and told the truth, just not all of it. Making sure things are clear, I said. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and for the first time neither did mine. So I stood up and carried my cup to the sink, letting the distance speak for me. The silence stretched after that. Not the comfortable kind, but the brittle kind that cracks when touched. My mother busied herself wiping a counter that was already clean. My sister hovered near the window, watching the street as if something might arrive to rescue her from the room. I could feel the shift then. They sensed movement they couldn't see, pressure they hadn't planned for. I stayed where I was, hands resting on the counter, feeling the cool surface steady my breathing. The phone rang mid-afternoon. Not mine. The house phone, which hadn't rung in years. My mother answered, cheerful at first, then stiff. She listened without interrupting, nodding as if the person on the other end could see her. When she hung up, she didn't look at me right away. That hesitation mattered. It told me the conversation hadn't gone the way she expected. That was the school, she said finally. They had questions. I'm sure they did, I replied. My sister spun around. What did you tell them? Only what was true. She scoffed, but there was fear under it now. I saw it in the way her hands clenched, unclenched. She started talking fast, justifying choices I hadn't challenged out loud. I let her. People reveal more when they rush. My mother tried to slow her, but the rhythm was broken already. Control once cracked rarely reseals cleanly. Another call came, this time for me. I stepped onto the porch, the late-day sun warming my arms. The woman introduced herself carefully, using her full name and title. That, too, was information. She asked if I was safe. I answered yes. She asked if my child was with me. I paused, then answered honestly. The pause was louder than any raised voice could have been. When I went back inside, the house felt different. Smaller, sharper. My mother sat down, something she rarely did in moments of stress. You didn't have to involve outsiders, she said, her voice low. I didn't, I replied. They noticed. That truth landed harder than an accusation. Outsiders imply betrayal. Noticing implies inevitability. My sister grabbed her keys. I'm going to check on Anna, she said. I didn't stop her. I watched her leave, her confidence frayed, movements jerky. My mother turned to me then, really looked at me as if seeing a version she'd dismissed too long. You're making this bigger than it needs to be, she said. No, I answered. I'm making it accurate. She pressed her lips together. For a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the word voted, and the feeling passed. Accuracy has a way of clarifying emotions. The afternoon dragged. Each sound felt amplified. A car door slamming down the street. A dog barking. My phone buzzed twice with messages I didn't open yet. I wanted to keep this moment intact, to let them sit with uncertainty a little longer. Consequences don't need announcing. They arrive whether invited or not. When my sister returned, she didn't meet my eyes. She went straight to my mother, whispering urgently. I caught fragments. They asked. I didn't think. She was calm. My mother's shoulders sagged with each word. Calm had become the threat. Dinner went untouched. No one mentioned it. We sat around the table like strangers waiting for instructions that wouldn't come. I felt tired then, deeply so, but not weak. There's a difference you learn with age. This tiredness came with clarity, not confusion. As evening settled, the phone rang again. My phone this time. I answered in front of them. I listened. I said yes. No. Then, I understand. When I hung up, my mother stood abruptly. What's happening? She demanded. I looked at her, at both of them, and felt something settle into place. Not victory. Not yet. Something firmer. Something earned. Things are being corrected, I said. They stared at me, waiting for more. I didn't give it. I didn't need to. The air between us was already heavy with what they couldn't undo, and for the first time I knew they felt it too. I looked at her, at both of them, and felt something settle into place. Not victory. Not yet. Something firmer. Something earned. The phone rang again before anyone spoke. This time my mother didn't reach for it. She watched me instead, her authority finally unsure. I answered, listening carefully, asking one clarifying question, then thanking the voice on the other end. When I hung up, the room felt suspended, like breath held too long. We need to go, I said. Now. My sister opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She grabbed her coat anyway, movements sharp and offended. My mother followed, silent, her keys clenched too tightly in her hand. The drive across town was quiet. Streetlights flickered on, one by one, as evening deepened. Traffic moved around us, ordinary and indifferent. My hands rested steady on my lap. I noticed how calm my body felt, how different that was from fear. We pulled into a parking lot I knew well. Neutral. Visual. The building's windows reflected our faces back at us, distorted and pale. My mother stiffened beside me, straightening her posture like armor. Inside, the air smelled like paper and cleaner, the kind of scent meant to signal order. A woman greeted us by name. She spoke gently, firmly, the way people do when rules matter and personal feelings do not. She explained what had been reviewed. What documentation showed. Who had overstepped and where assumptions had replaced permission. Her tone never changed. That steadiness mattered. No one raised their voice. No one needed to. Facts were doing the work now. My sister tried to speak for me. She always had, jumping ahead as if speed equaled authority. The woman stopped her with a lifted hand. We'll hear from the mother, she said, and looked directly at me. I told the truth. All of it. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just clearly. I described routines, permissions, the small decisions that had been taken from me without question. As I spoke, I realized something else had been taken too. My habit of minimizing myself to keep peace. I didn't do that here. I let the pauses exist. I let my voice hold. When they brought Anna in, she ran to me without hesitation. Her arms were tight around my waist, her face pressed into my sweater. I felt the weight of her, the warmth, the certainty. I closed my eyes and breathed her in, steadying both of us. No one interrupted. No one tried to frame the moment differently. The woman explained next steps. Boundaries. Conditions. Language that sounded cold but felt like protection. Papers were slid across a table. Pens clicked. My mother protested softly, then stopped when no one responded. Silence had finally found its proper place. Outside, the sky had gone dark blue, the kind of evening that feels heavier than it looks. My sister stood apart, arms crossed, anger drained into something smaller and confused. My mother looked older. Not fragile. Just exposed. "You didn't have to do it this way," she said, searching my face. "Yes," I replied. "I did." The drive home was different. Anna talked about her day in small pieces as if checking whether the world still worked. I answered each one. I matched her tone, kept things steady. My mother watched us in the mirror, quiet. For once she didn't correct me or fill the space. At the house I packed a bag. Not everything. Just what mattered. Anna's clothes. Her books. My sister hovered in doorways, wanting to say something meaningful and failing each time. My mother followed me room to room, unsure how to reclaim ground she'd assumed permanent. At the door she reached for my arm. I stepped back. "This isn't punishment," I said. "It's distance." She nodded slowly as if learning a new word. My sister said nothing at all. Later, in my own space, Anna asleep beside me, I lay awake listening to her breathe. The room felt unfamiliar in a good way, like a place reset. I noticed small things. The rhythm of the clock, the weight of the blanket, the way my shoulders finally loosened. The quiet felt earned now. I thought about the woman I'd been taught to be, agreeable, grateful, careful, and the woman I had become instead. Yes. But not compliant. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's reclaiming what was taken and refusing to return to the old shape. I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd restored something essential, something quiet and durable, built not from anger but from choice, patience, and the willingness to stand alone when necessary. As I turned off the light, I understood the truth that would stay with me. They took my child once. They would never take me again. Not now, not ever, not in silence again. If this story moved you, you're not alone, and there are more like it here. Subscribe for powerful, emotional stories about strength, boundaries, and the kind of revenge that doesn't need to shout.